You're live. Okay, 2 p.m. on January, what is today? 15th. We are here with getting an update on wildland fires from last season's wildfire season and other relevant upcoming bills. I love the capture on that one. We have with us Commissioner Fitzko. Am I pronouncing that right?
You did.
Yeah, I thought so. I've been doing that for a while, just making sure I didn't have any rust on it. Anyway, good to see you. How are you?
Good. Good to see everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us here to visit on wildland fires. For the record, I'm Danielle Fitzko, Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation. Before I go into a quick high level of what we'll talk to you about, and then I'll pass it on to someone really more intelligent about the topic than me, I did just want to pass on our gratitude for last year for your support for the fire apparatus, which is really a wildland fire engine. I would like to say we were down to the fire engine dealer and we just bought it and it's already in action, but that's not the way it works. But we're working with BGS and we'll soon to have an RFP out. So it's a process, but we're moving it as quickly as we can. So really appreciate your support. Today, we're going to give you an update on the past wildfire activity. As you know, Vermont faced the worst drought in over 100 years, which made wildfire activity pretty high. It was high risk for us. When you see the numbers, which Dan Dillner, our fire supervisor, will share with you, you might be like, it's not that, you might say it's not that alarming, but let me tell you, there was a huge amount of work behind that, keeping both the numbers of fires and the acres of burned low. We implemented a statewide burn ban. FPR supported 12 fires, supporting local fire departments. We brought in federal resources to have a helicopter drop water in Williston. That was a first. And we were ready to mobilize more resources, crews, and equipment if we had like a really large fire, or if there were two big fires going on at one time. How do we really respond to that? I will tell you, by the time winter arrived and people were happy that worked on wildland fires, that it came early because they were exhausted. I just want to recognize those that were first responders on wildland fires. They really worked hard this year, and that's one dedicated group of people that serve Vermont. We're also here to share with you changes to Vermont's forest fires and fire prevention statutes. Over the past few years, our team has been building our systems and capacity for prevention, preparedness, and response. We've consulted with local, regional, and federal partners, and we surveyed town forest fire wardens and fire chief to understand what we need to modernize our statutes for the future. What we're sharing with you today is the result of that work, a proposal we believe is real positive improvements for the future of Vermont's wildfire management. I'd like to acknowledge Representative Jay Hooper. I just can't say Representative Hooper here. I can't, he's our legislative representative. I have to overview this Northeast Forest Fire Prevention Compact. And he's been engaged with us, how to respond on a regional and state level, helped us with this proposal. The proposal we're going to share with you today, the way I'm looking at it, kind of falls into sort of three buckets. The first is authority and coordination. How do we do that in Vermont? This is really about clearly defining authority so the right people are empowered to move when necessary, and also really clarifying roles, particularly with issuing burn permits. Basically, there's fire departments, there's fire chiefs, there's town fire wardens, there's FPR. What's everybody's role, and really clarifying that. The second is prevention and risk reduction. This gives the state and towns like modern, flexible tools to reduce risks before emergencies. We put on a statewide burn ban. We have a scalable approach where we can do like, let's restrict burn ban, then we can restrict campfires. So it really sort of meant to be flexible, so we meet the needs on the ground. And the third is preparedness and capacity. We're proposing to actually establish a task force to assess Vermont's long-term wildfire response capacity and make recommendations back to the General Assembly about staffing, equipment, funding, infrastructure, and policy needs. At its core, the statutes that we're talking about and the framework were built in 1904. These changes, we believe, are to modernize authority, strengthen prevention, and ensure that we're really prepared for the future, thinking forward with the task force. I also want to be clear, like when we're talking about wildland fires, I think people probably think of out west. We are not the West. Our forests, our fire behavior and fire history, we're just really different. But I don't want you to think we don't have risk here in Vermont. It's not insignificant. But it does mean we still need to design a system that's for reality for Vermont today and not one that was established 120 some years ago. The reasons our numbers were low this year is not because the risk was low, it's because we did take a lot of extraordinary efforts and proactive steps to prevent fires from becoming large. And it required coordination and it did require significant resources. We actually have a BAA request in right now to fund our overtime and dropping in a helicopter and bringing on staff from the National Forest of over $100,000. And I think it really tested our limits of our current system. The statute updates and the task force we're proposing are not a reaction to disaster, which is good. We're not here because, oh gosh, we didn't have ourselves set up right. But it is really a deliberate effort for the future. So we're ready before disaster happens. This is about public safety, protecting Vermonters' homes, livelihoods, supporting our local fire departments, and ensuring the state has the tools it needs when conditions are escalated beyond local capacity, which can happen if we get to a point where we can't manage it at the local level and state level. We need to bring in federal resources and we need the authority to call those resources in and the funding. So I just call like this is kind of like trying to get it right before it's a disaster. So we appreciate you engaging with us. And I'm going to pass it to Dan Dillon, who's a fire supervisor who lives this every day and one of those extreme dedicated public servants. Unless you have a question for me.
Any questions for the commissioner? Yes, we do. We have a hand. Representative Nugent. Sorry. Oh.
I know you said it's not like California or forests don't act like that, which makes sense, but I was thinking about if there are any risks similar to how they with like the power lines. Do we have anything like that and
Dan could probably will tell you a little bit more, but power lines certainly can be a starter of fires. And I think we had a couple this year, at least nine that was started by utilities. So certainly a risk. Most of them are human caused. I think that's the reality when that's why we did the burn ban and there's one of the bigger ones we think maybe was a cigarette. So in reality that prevention is key and that's we're really working hard on providing more flexible tools for that.
Anything for the commissioner before we shift over to our guy in the field? Welcome, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Of course.
All right, my name is Dan Dillner. I'm the State Forest Fire Supervisor for the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. Thanks for your time. Going to talk a little bit about, like Commissioner Fitzko mentioned, just a little bit about last year's fire season. So, and then I'll talk a little bit just briefly about the history behind the fire prevention, forest fire and fire prevention statutes in the fire warden program, and then the proposed statute changes that we have put forward. And for each one of those, I'll talk a little bit about, I'll give you kind of a summary of what it is now, why we think it has concerns, what our proposed change would be, and then what the effects or what's the result of that would be. So this past year, Vermont had 84 fires for 66 acres. So it was above average year for numbers of fires, below average on acres. This does not include, these are fires on state, private, and municipal lands. The U.S. Forest Service also had 30 fires, which was about maybe 30 times more than normal. So they usually have one or two, so it was also a big year there. We started out, as you know, with some flooding. I mean, early spring was fairly wet. Very few fires during our normal spring fire season. But then by midsummer, we were into some pretty severe drought conditions and then leading to extreme drought later on. We had 164 days of moderate or greater fire danger in Vermont. So that's moderate, high, or very high. So when those adjectives, they describe how likely a fire might be how hard it would be to control and how likely it would be to escape. So at low fire danger, you would expect virtually no fires, it would escape easily. So the higher the adjective, the more likely it would escape. So 164 days is quite a lot. So that led us into some drought. And then by towards the end of July, we had the largest fire that we've seen in July in Vermont since 1998, and that was Scotch Hill Road Fire in the town of Fairhaven.
Can you pause for just a second? Your slides.
The slides aren't advancing on the screen. We're trying to find a solution.
Okay.
Okay, I'll let you run that IT game for a moment. Yes.
Try to join the meeting. I can run the slides. As soon as I get it's connecting. Great. Okay, that's the hosting things.
Commissioner, I appreciate the shout out, even though I haven't done jack.
You went to your meeting.
We're online, sir. We're online, sir.
That's why I said jack.
Okay, I think I got it. I think I've got it.
There we go. Whoa.
It's funny because yesterday I walked in the judiciary and the first thing Martin said, he was mid-sentence, he said, by the way, we're live. Just-
Situational awareness.
You good?
Ready if you are, sir.
Okay. So depending on the conditions, we change our preparedness level for wildfire in the state. And so it's a level of 1 through 5, and we were at level 4 for over 2 weeks, which is for us pretty unusual, especially for, late summer, early fall. We haven't seen that in the past. Our department normally, last year we had called out for 9 responses. This year it was 12. So last year was a crazy record year for us. And then this year was another record. We were actually on fires in Vermont for over 24 days, our FPR staff. Because of the conditions here, and we were able to, it was necessary for us to coordinate with our partners in the compact. So includes the northeastern states. So every 3 mornings a week, I was meeting virtually with the fire supervisors in the northeastern states and eastern provinces of Canada to talk about the fire situation, because we share resources and realizing who had what available. Because of the conditions across the area, not everybody was able to share resources all the time because they needed to keep them for their state. Because of those meetings, it was recognized, and our preparedness level being at 4, we coordinated with the state of New Hampshire and the National Forest and the White Mountains and the Green Mountains all on the same day to put our burn restrictions on. That coordination got noticed in the eastern area, which is the whole eastern part of the United States, and the U.S. Forest Service was able to put some funding up to have that helicopter pre-positioned for the first time in any of our knowledge, to have an aircraft pre-positioned for the use of primarily Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And then lo and behold, on October 4th, we had a fire in Williston, which you'd think Williston wouldn't have, a mountain, but Brown Owl Mountain is in Williston. And on top of it is a cell tower with communications and radio communications, which I believe includes the radio communications for fire and EMS as well. So our staff were there, and we made the decision that we need to get that helicopter because it's available and it would save a lot of time and money. And they were able to get that on the fire. The state will pay for that, but they were able to put just about 11,000 gallons of water on that fire in about half an hour. So, I think overall probably saved a lot of money. But because of that coordination with the other partners and states, we were able to have that resource available. Just a couple of things that we did this year. We taught a lot of classes in wildland fire across the state and some spring fire department trainings of about 550 students. We every year do a 50-50 purchasing grant for towns where rural towns under 10,000, they are able to purchase PPE. This year was limited just to PPE, personal protective equipment, but we were able to give out $40,000 to 33 different towns, and they could buy $80,000 with the equipment and half was paid for. So very good program. Early season, when it was wet here, we were able to send 5 forestry staff out on assignments out of state to assist as part of the national effort. But then as the drought persisted here, we made sure everyone was staying in Vermont to assist here. Some accomplishments that we had, we were able to lease another fire response vehicle from BGS this year. We did purchase a UTV skid unit, so that's like a mini pump and tank that goes on the back of a UTV that we share with USAR. And thanks to the legislature, we were able to order a Type 6 engine, which is still in the process of ordering, as Commissioner mentioned. All right, shifting to some background of the Forest Fire Warden Program. As Commissioner mentioned, it was started in 1904, following some large fires. I think 5,000 acres burned in Vermont in 1903. So the governor appointed a commissioner of forestry to oversee the town forest fire warden program. At that time, it was the first selectman in each town was the fire warden. And then in 1912, it was changed to be appointed by the select board. The current forest fire prevention statutes, they were set up at a time when there were really no rural fire departments. There were village fire departments and city fire departments, but very few rural fire departments. So it was, at that time, FPR or well, it was the Vermont Forest Service at that time, but we're overseeing the town forest fire wardens really directly. And sort of the way it was designed before fire departments, that's kind of what we're talking about today, is where it's sort of maintained as a separate system from fire response in Vermont. So you've got your fire chiefs, fire departments, and the fire chiefs having that authority. The fire wardens work with their town, and some towns are very much engaged in the fire department, but there's no statute that dictates how that works. So it's sort of kept separate for the past over 100 years. But I also want to point out the warden program has undergone many changes over the last over 100 years. For instance, in 2016, the statutes were amended to remove the authority from the fire warden to arrest without warrant citizens that refuse to fight a fire in a forest fire when they're called. So at that time, before there were a lot of fire departments, maybe some of you have seen those town forest fire warden signs around. That was a rallying point. That's not how we operate today. We don't round up citizens to fight fires. That's done by fire departments. Just kind of looking at our neighbors. Vermont has not seen a catastrophic large wildfire, but it's around us. I mean, if you remember 2023, twice the acreage of Vermont burned in Quebec. That's not very far away. Massachusetts has had some crazy years. Connecticut in 2024 had the Hawthorne fire, which is only 112 acres. It doesn't sound very big. It isn't compared to large Western fires, but the cost was in the millions. They're still actually trying to figure out totally what it costs with 2 firefighter battalions. So when we talk about a large fire in Vermont, it doesn't need to be large. What we really should say is a complicated fire or a complex incident, because it does not need to be large. Think about 40-acre fire in Chittenden County with all that, the urban interface. It's just, we need to not think about like giant Western fires. We're probably not going to see that with our fuel type, but it doesn't mean it won't be costly, and it doesn't mean it couldn't be devastating to homes. We had the worst drought in 130 years. And the past year, we had at least 21 fires that we know of that lasted more than a day. So when a fire department a fire starts lasting more than one day, local resources, local fire departments, they really have a hard time dealing with that. They're volunteers for the most part. They need to get back to work. So these are the things that we're trying to think about for the future. So we proposed some reforms that will help bring us to that, letting us be more prepared for a large wildfire. Like I said, more of a complex wildfire. So we, as Commissioner Fitsko mentioned, we engaged fire chiefs, fire wardens, and did a survey, trying to figure out where we need to be. And we think what we're proposing will help bring us there. And thanks to Representative Hooper for helping to bring this forward. Just to note that There's extra notes that goes along with this presentation that you all should have received. So if I have to go through some of this quickly to stay on time, you actually all have some more background. Or will. So the first one, statute that I wanted to talk about, and some of the ones where it's really, really minor, what's been edited was just some word change. I didn't include slides on this because I wanted to focus on the ones that had some more substantive change. The first one mentioned is the commissioner statutes. Commissioner of Forest and Parks, the way it currently is that the commissioner designee is the state fire warden. And may act in place as a fire warden throughout the state. Our concern is that it really doesn't define what the intent of this authority is. In a minute, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. So our proposal is to clarify what the commissioner's authority is. And so we think, it's already in place that the commissioner is the state fire designee is the state fire warden, where the commissioner has the ability to manage a large incident or any wildfire in Vermont. But this clarifies that the commissioner does have that authority to take over the incident as the incident commander. It's not something that we are looking to go and take over fires in towns. I'm hoping that it doesn't get interpreted that the state is looking to go and just, go into every community and push out the locals. The purpose of why we would need that authority is, say there's a large incident where we need to order resources from out of state. Forest and Parks, we're the entity that can bring in those resources, like the helicopter I just talked about. The town is not going to be paying for that. If we need to order up crews, if we had a fire that was across different towns where the fire chief for that town, now there's a fire that's more than one town. So having us have the ability to have the authority to manage that, because if we had to order a large national incident management team to run a really significant fire, we need to have that authority to delegate to that team to run the fire. If the fire cost over $100,000 in suppression costs, there is something called a Fire Management Assistance Grant with FEMA, which we do the paperwork to fill that out every year with the governor's office. If that was to be requested, the state, we need to be the entity that's in charge of the fire. We can distribute that money out to locals if they're involved, but we need to be the entity that puts in for that. So it ties it all in together and allows the commissioner to have that authority if needed. Also gives the commissioner the statute edit was to appoint special forest fire wardens, which I was already there. It was just under another statute. And later on, it defines what those special fire wardens do and who they are. The other thing mentioned here is just a clarification with the Northeast Compact statute that the commissioner serves on that. Right now, it just says state forester, and in our department, the state forester and the commissioner, sometimes the same person, not always. And the last one is the commissioner can ban primitive campfires on A&R lands. So that ties in later on with the fires, with the fire in campfires, but just to clarify that has authorities there. We think it gives clear lines of authority to help with prompt response and allowing us to have that ability to manage incidents. Um, 2641 is town forest fire wardens. This one, currently the way it's set up is every town has a forest fire warden, a town forest fire warden. They're appointed by the Commissioner of Forest and Parks for a term of 5 years with the approval of the select board. If they were to be removed, they're removed by the commissioner with the approval of the select board. So neither entity can do it on their own. There is no requirement for them to be on a fire department. It's not in statute in any way, shape, form with that. But they have two main duties in statute. One is that they are the town forest fire warden is the entity that's responsible for forest fire suppression. And they are the only entity that can legally issue permits to kindle fire. So that's their two main jobs. Our concern is that the fire warden has the authority over forest fires, but the chief engineer, the chief of the fire department has the legal authority over the apparatus and personnel of the fire department. The statute says that the fire warden may share that authority with the chief or may delegate that to the chief, but there's nothing that forces that. So that's kind of the concern. And then, of course, the town forest fire warden issues burn permits, but if they're not associated with the fire department, which is the entity that responds to fires, and guess what? Number one cause of fires in Vermont is people burning debris usually without a permit. This last year was only 30% of the fires, but normally it can be up to 50%. So our proposed change is that the chief engineer of the fire department that provides protection to a town, because not every town has a fire department, would be the town forest fire warden by default. Also in this proposed change is that the special fire wardens the commissioner can appoint are state employees, part of the wildland fire program. That gives us clear ability to manage fires and defines who they are. It also, so right now, a deputy fire warden has the same power and authority as a town forest fire warden in each town. And this proposal would be, it would give the town forest fire warden the authority to designate as many deputy fire wardens as needed on their own without having to have Forest and Parks appoint. If we don't sign up for us at all, it would be handled locally. So kind of the whole thing is to give it a lot more to local control as opposed to having another layer where we have to do reappointments and all that. It also, I think, giving.
One second, we got a question from Representative.
Sorry, go ahead.
So by doing this, by giving the power to the chief of the fire department, if a town has a fire department, there would no longer be the appointment being made by the select board anymore. That it would automatically default to would eliminate that.
Right.
So.
Assuming that each municipality has some mechanism to have the chief be already appointed, whether they're elected in the fire department or however it works. The way we wrote it was that if the town did not have a fire department, every town has a fire department that covers it. So that would potentially be a chief of another fire department that covers them. Maybe they cover multiple towns, but that chief could appoint a deputy to issue burn permits, and very likely it may be the same person that's already doing it now. It's probably what we expect to happen. But this would line up. It would line it up. I think that's the next slide. So yeah, we line it up under the chief, under the municipality, and giving that chief the authority to appoint deputies would help alleviate any extra workload that now we're saying, the state's saying now that you're also the fire warden, but really there's no extra workload if you have appointed deputy to do the work or for burn permits. Really think it's shifting the fire warden and deputy fire warden appointments to municipal control. Okay, the next one is salary. I bet nobody knows that this is the case anywhere out there in towns or other. That the salary for town forest fire wardens in statute is paid by the town. I think most wardens receive nothing, but it is in there. FPR annually pays fire warden $30 for fulfilling the duties of the position and filling out reports. Also $30 for attending trainings and $10 for each fire report. Our concern is basically if we're no longer appointing them anymore, that it doesn't seem necessary that we would be paying, or we also wouldn't be able to require them. The current statute says we require them to attend trainings. We would not be able to do that. So our proposed change is that we just leave the provision, and then the town can pay the wardens if they want to. And remove our payment provisions, lining the payment with municipal and fire departments. It would be an annual savings for our department of about $12,000 to $15,000. So the duties of the fire wardens, one of the things that the way it is now with the current state is fire wardens by statute are required to report all wildland fires to The commissioner within 2 weeks of extinguishment. And deputy wardens also have the same responsibilities as forest fire wardens. Our concern is that we need, as a wildland fire program, we need to know when there are fires occurring. And we don't need to know in 2 weeks. We need to know today when there's a fire. So that the staffing levels that we determine, like on a weekend, if we decide to pay people to be ready and available, it's based on fire danger, but it's also based on fire occurrences. So whenever every little fire in a town is part of a much bigger picture, that gets reported nationally so we can build a picture, like help us have that helicopter pre-positioned. So not being able to find out for a couple of weeks that there's a fire, we feel is a real problem, helping us build our staffing that's needed. There are times when states or agencies actually bring in resources, meaning crews or firefighting resources from another state or other agency, and pre-position them because of the conditions, and that would also feed into that. So if we don't know what's going on, we can't be prepared. So our proposed changes that we would be, the wildland fire program FPR would be, I think it specifically reads the commissioner would be informed of fires within 24 hours of discovery, and then a final report within 48 hours of extinguishment. And this is actually really not at all unlike the ANR spill team has to be notified of any kind of a spill for a hazardous material. So it's really not that different. And this statute clarifies the deputy wardens only would have the authority and role to issue burn permits. So it clearly defines that. Our outcome, and we think it would help make us more aware of fires to be able to staff appropriately. And having those deputy wardens appointed locally would help with additional workload on the town forest fire warden, which is the chief. Any questions?
From the table at that moment? Are you forming a thought, Representative?
I had a question, but I'll think of it. I'll ask him.
Okay. Suppression. This is about state aid for suppression of forest fires, the statute. This is kind of a misunderstood statute, I think. I think there's a lot of perception out there that if there's a forest fire, the state pays for it in your town, in any town. That is not the case. Years ago, the statutes read that if there was a forest fire and the town paid the firefighting costs, the state would reimburse for half of those. That got changed 10 years ago, and this in the previous time the statutes were edited. That currently it states that municipalities are responsible for suppression costs on all non-ANR lands. So this would also exclude federal lands. However, it says that FPR may reimburse for the suppression costs. And it does say that FPR shall reimburse suppression costs on ANR land. So that's forest and parks and fish and wildlife. Our concern is there's a lack of clarity when FPR reimburses for those fires on, well, really on all lands and how it works. Where it says may, what does that mean? When may we do that? And there's no assurance that we are involved in suppression on our lands, ANR lands, if we are a party that shall pay for that fire. There's no mechanism in statute for us to be involved in that. So the proposed changes that suppression costs on ANR lands may be paid. So it's still the town is responsible, but they may be paid by FPR if other funds are available for emergency funding, such as that fire management assistance grant for FEMA, or if it was a large fire and there was emergency funds from the legislature. And on ANR lands, it just defines what the requirements are for getting reimbursed. And so it lists, I think that FPR is notified and requested to assist on the fire within an hour. And that the reporting, I think, is within 24 hours. We just think it gives clear guidance for payments in all lands. And so, we can say, no, we can't pay for this fire. But yeah, we are, because this is how it works. It just cleans it up. 2645 open burn permits. So currently a permit to kindle fire. So that's a burn permit is technically called the permit to kindle fire. For burning in the statutes clearly define clean natural debris, clean natural vegetation. So that's still in there, just have been shifted a little bit. So it's required with the following exemptions. If there's snow on the site, do not need a permit. If the fire has been built in a stone arch or a ring, and it's not located within a field of dry grass or other contiguous to other flammable material, do not need a permit. Or if it's 200 feet away from any woodland, do not need a permit. These permits are only obtained from the town forest fire ward. Our concern is, although it talks about stone arches and rings, there's really no definition of what that really is. There's actually no authority for the commissioner to ban campfires, since campfires don't really even exist in the statutes. We feel like that's a concern, especially last year where we had a fire season where we did have to do a ban on debris burning. The only way technically to ban fires that don't fit under the category of debris burning would be for the governor to close the woods. So there's another statute we'll talk about in a minute, but that also closes hunting and fishing. So those are our concerns. What we're proposing is some categories of fires to define what a campfire is. So, and would give us ability to kind of do a scalable approach, which I'll mention in a minute. But category 1 fire would be the campfire that now has a definition. And a campfire would not need a permit, but it can be banned by the commission. So a campfire would be 36 inches or less, and it would not need a permit. It would be 36 inches or less in a ring, or 36 inches or less that's 200 feet away from any flammable vegetation. Category 2 fire would be 36 inches, greater than 36 inches or less than 200 feet to a flammable vegetation and require a permit from the town forest fire warden as now, and also can be banned by the commissioner. Category 3 fire is a new category that we also came up with. Right now, if someone does a prescribed burn like us doing it for habitat management or fuels management, or a town fire department is doing a training, they call them control burns for training, or a farmer wants to burn a field. There's nothing in the statutes that talks about that at all. It's just sort of lumped under open burning. So this defines that as a category 3 fire, requires a permit from the town forest fire warden, and also can be banned by the commissioner and the fire warden. The only difference with category 3 is also requires a plan. It doesn't say it has to be written. It just has to have a plan that talks about contingency resources. So if someone wanted to get a permit from the fire warden to burn their field, the fire warden say, okay, what's your plan? Make sure this fire doesn't escape. So it gives us a potential scalable approach. Your question?
Representative Huber of Randolph.
Dan, first, great to see you. Welcome back. There's currently no penalty if you are responsible for starting forest fires.
Correct. At least in the state statutes. I don't know how that would be covered under municipal statutes or other type of statutes, but listed under these, there's no penalty that I know of. So our expected outcome is that, it would clearly define the type of fires that need a permit. It would enable the state to have a scalable approach. So it would potentially, if it was just like this last summer, we probably would have started with a burn ban for category 2 and category 3 fires. And then maybe towards the end when it was discontinuing forever. So if we banned campfires, that would include state parks and private campgrounds. So, we would probably do that a little bit later. But this year we may have had to do that. This is that statute I talked about, closing the woods. Really not a lot of changes here. I just thought we'd throw it in. It was done in 1963, the last time. That up there, too small to read probably, but that was signed by Governor Hoff in 1963. So the only changes there just removes the exemptions about owners and households and their tenants and changes it from newspapers to modernizing the communications. So otherwise it's still there. Probably would never use it, but it just seems like it's there. If things got really crazy, it might be nice to have another tool. Fire prevention tickets. So this is another little known statute. It's its own subchapter in Title 10, subchapter 7 of Uniform Fire Prevention Ticket. So this is a ticket that can be issued by a town forest fire warden. And it's processed and gone through the criminal division of Superior Court. The fees for these tickets are $25 a violation, $25 additional for each day of non-compliance with a violation, total violation not to exceed $75. Our concern with this is that it's very complicated to fill out. I think I've only helped with 2 in 20 years. They're not generally done. It relies on the town forest fire warden to issue a criminal ticket. So they're not a law enforcement person. They're not trained in law enforcement. Us as an administrator of the system, we're not trained in law enforcement. It also, I feel like it's inappropriate for a person in the town that's really out there in their community to try to educate people. And now they're issuing a criminal ticket, really for almost no money anyway. It's very likely going to be thrown out potentially because it's difficult to process and it's just not used. So our proposal is to actually remove this in its entirety. And I think it's misunderstood how simple it would be to just issue a ticket. So that's our proposal. And I think the outcome is it enforces the idea that the town forest fire warden really is someone out there to educate and to work in their community as opposed to issuing criminal tickets. Because if someone decides not to pay it, they're going to go to court as well as the town forest fire warden is going to go to court. I think there's a couple of municipal statutes, I think that they could rely on somewhat to help with regarding enforcement, but also I think it'll encourage municipalities to help create some of their own statutes that can get better assistance from law enforcement for people burning illegally. Okay, last one, just to mention that that task force that is going to be convened. So bringing in Forest and Parks, Division of Fire Safety, Public Safety, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, at least a minimum or maximum of 2 fire chiefs, and Vermont Emergency Management come up with a task force to really look at wildland fire in Vermont and our response capacity and make some recommendations and then report back in July of 27. I think moving to the end, the question.
Representative Pisco, this might be a crazy question, but does the drought of 25, is there a potential to have a higher threat for 26 if we have another drought season? Does the ground stay dry and then it just, you know what I'm saying?
If we start spring fire season and we're still in drought, it could easily.
But it's a higher level.
Yeah. Right now, I think the drought is still remaining on some of the eastern part of the state, so if we started in drought, with low water tables, certainly that could make us into, starting off at a worse place. Usually in spring fire season, the heavier fuels down logging and stuff are already pretty wet inside. So they're not, and the ground is wet. So the fires don't last very long. And that was the problem that happened in the summer is, it was so dry in the ground. So whenever there was a fire, it went for days because it was hard to put out and it went deep in the ground, burning heavier materials. So if we started spring fire season where the fine fuels are ready to burn like they often are in the spring and those larger things in the ground was dry, that could be really bad. I've seen that before. Thankfully, we could be in drought and have almost no fires if it was damp. It could be having light rain and be in drought. So it's hard to predict. We haven't gotten any real predictions from the predictive services stuff that hasn't been nationally for this upcoming season yet. But we will obviously be monitoring to make sure we can be prepared. So it could be.
As a native, as a native Vermonter, I was amazed at how dry the brooks and the water levels were. I mean, what the floods were and how much water there was, and then to see the brooks just a trickle, and I have a spring on my property that was just a drip, drip. Yeah,
So, and one of the things I didn't mention, in the beginning, I really think we dodged a bullet this year.
oh,
for
I
fire.
think so.
The fuels were as dry as we've seen in a really long time. They were definitely dry enough to have a catastrophic fire. What didn't align was we just didn't have the wind event. We've seen some wind events in the last couple of weeks with, a lot, we did not see that this past summer and fall. If we had combined that with the ignition on a slope, we would have had a large fire. So we were very fortunate. The burn ban, in our opinion, did really help. The main cause of fires in Vermont, like I said, is debris burning. And this year, that was the main cause. And after the burn ban, it was really easy to see, like it shifted to being campfires. Illegal campfires out there. They got down in the ground and debris burning was only 30% of the cause. So we think it helped. It really helped certainly with getting it out in the media. We did a lot of public outreach, that kind of stuff. It did help.
Representative Hooper of Randolph.
Usually you meet regionally with, once a month about the conditions of the dryness or every 2 weeks?
With the compact and stuff?
No, with your counterparts.
Out of state.
Yes.
So we meet every Tuesday throughout the whole fire season from like, early spring all the way through.
But that was more often, right, than usual?
And then, so this year, in addition to that, we were meeting, 3 mornings a week
Yeah,
virtually.
right.
So that was something we actually had never done, just to coordinate and more of an informal coordination of what do you have for resources, what's it looking like in your state? And then we felt it was positive to coordinate burning restrictions at the same time. And that was noticed by governors of multiple states. So that, yeah.
So for how many weeks or months did you meet? Right.
So we started it, I would say, I think after the commissioners meeting in the end of August, we continued through, I think towards just about the end of October.
Well, because I remember you were telling me some pretty eye-opening things in Albany, and you'll probably do that again if we have a dry summer. You just keep meeting.
Yeah, I mean, depends, that was something we hadn't done before, and that was just a really good way to, it was really informal, and we could just have a conversation each day. We coordinate a lot with New Hampshire and the US Forest Service, what they have for resources. And the US Forest Service, because they were seeing a fire season that they'd never seen in the recent history, they brought in a lot of folks from out of state. They had some crews available primarily for the national forest, but we were able to utilize them on multiple fires in state under the agreements we had with them. So that was also really ideal. In volunteer fire departments, they did the majority of the firefighting across Vermont. It's just when those and they did a fantastic job, kept the fire small. It's just when those fires go multiple days, they really need to get back to station coverage for other things. House fires, more wildfires. So that's where we come in and help bring in resources from forestry staff as well as others from out of state.
We get him. Second.
Sure. Thank you very much. We do have about 5 minutes, so if you'd like to join us.
I have like a 13-second.
Okay.
Charles Martin, NR. This came up in other committees, so I sent it to your staff assistant, a drought monitor tool. There's only Chittenden County, Chittenden County is the only county in the state with normal conditions in terms of its dryness level. So every other county in Vermont is either moderate drought or abnormally dry, and at least all over some of the county. So still, as of January 13th, it updates the weekly update. So we're chewing on an earlier question about, drought carry forward effects.
I noticed on that map that there's a section that says none. What
Yeah,
is that?
that there's not a, I think it indicates just normal levels of.
Okay, all right. It just confused me because the very next one below it was abnormally dry. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And Nick, I think we could put that up under today's testimony.
Okay.
That should be helpful for folks. And any additional questions? Dr. Cooper?
How are the specs coming for that apparatus?
So we're working with purchasing, state purchasing, so it's a lengthy process. We have, I think they're probably by the end of the month, the actual advertisement will be going out to in some sort of a system that goes out to any vendor that's interested in bidding on it. We're excited.
Too.
Just a commentary on that, and then from a municipality perspective, I don't know if it's the same for you all, but some of selectmen in my town, when we're just in the process of doing new ambulance.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can take up to 2 years. You get it, contract let, bid selection, actually get in the queue to get one, and then get it retrofitted. So
I think we've done a lot of that, that initial work where I think we're gonna be pretty good on like the advertising would be pretty short.
yeah, good.
And then, but the build could take a year.
Yeah.
So
You're a little bit out, yeah.
we're a little bit out here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. Very nice to see you all again, and I'm
Thank
sure
you.
we'll have you back at some point in time because I expect that some of these statutorily requested statutory requests, that's what I'm trying to say, will be incorporated into a bill at some point. Rep. Pincinel, do you?
That was my next question, Jen.
Yeah.
Did they tell us their want for this year?
Yeah, so are you talking about budget or, I did not hear any budget requests, so no. And the changes are all to statute.
Okay.
So that can go in a form of legislation that is related to emergency response. Perfect. Would be my guess.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much. Nick, you can take us off.
We should give him a helicopter.